All right, we've had a couple more logins, so let's get this started. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Moreland, and I work in community engagement at the Missouri Historical Society. On behalf of MHS, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us virtually for the Gateway to Pride Throwback Chat, today spotlighting Coffee Cartel. I want to thank our Gateway to Pride programming sponsor, AARP, for supporting today's program and all the programs associated with Gateway to Pride virtual exhibit presented by the William A. Keir Foundation. Thank you also to our Missouri Historical Society members. We are very grateful for your contributions and support that help keep history alive. And if you're not a member yet, you can find out more about how you can support MHS at mohistory.org/support. I also want to thank everyone in the city of St. Louis and the county for your tax contributions through the Zoo Museum Tax District. Most of our programming remains virtual right now, and you can find the entire lineup of programs at mohistory.org or on the Missouri History Museum Facebook page. The Missouri History Museum is open Wednesday through Sunday with several safety precautions in place. We would love for you to make advanced reservations to visit us at the History Museum and at Soldiers Memorial Military Museum, and you can plan your visit and reserve free tickets at mohistory.org. Dennis George was born and raised in St. Louis, and while his background and experience has been producing large-scale events and running his own events management company, in 2005, he purchased Coffee Cartel and made it an anchor of the Central West End, leading the way in sponsoring events, promoting causes, and donating to area charities. Dennis has brought community service and lifelong commitment to the LGBTQIA+ community, both locally and nationally. He has served on the board of directors for St. Louis Effort for AIDS, Pride St. Louis, and the Millennium March on Washington for Equality. He has served on committees for Pause, Food Outreach, Doorways, KC Pride, Logo Film Fest, Dine Out for Life, Carnival, HRC, and countless others. He worked on Bud Light's first national gay ad campaign, Be Yourself, Make It a Bud Light, which to date remains AB's single largest consumer response campaign. And he received Pride St. Louis's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2018. So he's going to share the story of Coffee Cartel with you today. And then afterwards, we'll have a chance to kind of chime in with questions and memories through the chat box on the Zoom. So I'm going to pass it along to the speaker. Dennis, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Charles, and thanks also to the Missouri History Museum for giving me a great opportunity to share a little bit of history about the Coffee Cartel and the Central West End and what I consider to be our journey of diversity and inclusion for a retail store. The business really took on a life of its own, so let's just kind of jump in and talk a little bit about Coffee Cartel in the Central West End. And again, very honored to be asked to be here, and it's pretty exciting to share some of the history because Coffee Cartel was so much a part of all of us, and its history was so important to all of us, including myself and the team members that work there and the folks who are our great customers in the community. If you're unaware, Coffee Cartel was located in the city's Central West End, which, if you're not from St. Louis, that sits pretty much right in the middle of the city. A very eclectic neighborhood. The Central West End is made up of the largest concentration of nonprofit organizations in the region. The 63108 zip code has the most diverse population when it comes to income, and is most diverse when it comes to social services, as I said, with nonprofit organizations. So it's really, the Central West End is really a melting pot of the region. And it's made up of a lot of eclectic shops, a lot of stores, restaurants, boutiques, and certainly in the late 90s, that was more the case than it is today. In the late 90s and in the early 2000s, the neighborhood was full of a lot of small independent owners, a lot of small storefronts, and a lot of small shops. So it made way for, again, just the cultural melting pot. You overusing that word now, but it was really an eclectic blend of just tons and tons of different people. Coffee Cartel, um, as we mentioned in the intro, was started by Bob Leutman. And then I purchased the store from him in 2005. He was, at the time that I purchased it, the business was struggling and he was looking to close the store. And at that time, I was very involved in neighborhood and the businesses in the neighborhood. I was running the business association for the neighborhood. And that corner was such an anchor, I felt, for the stability of the neighborhood that I made an offer to purchase it. He accepted it to my surprise. I never intended to go into the retail business. I don't drink coffee and have no clue how to make coffee. So, but I knew what the importance of community was, and I knew that as an anchor in the neighborhood, a business could be an anchor. It could be a community spot. And when I purchased it, it had already built a reputation of a place to go if you wanted to socialize and be seen. And so building on that, I purchased the place in 2005 and then grew it to something bigger and certainly with a much broader reach. We had 17 team members that were earning at least $17 an hour, which was far ahead of retail stores at that time. When I first purchased it, the wages were typical waiter waitress wages of restaurants. So it was a low wage plus tips, raised almost within the first couple of years, raised it up to an hourly rate that combined with the tips was also people were making at least 17 an hour, and we monitored the tips that they were receiving in the store to make sure that they were at least bringing in some pretty decent revenue. I don't pretend that 17 an hour is all that fantastic, but for the time, it certainly was a little bit more on the high end and cutting edge. At the time that the store closed in 2018, we were 1.1 million in annual sales, which for a retail store, a coffee shop especially, the industry standard runs around $300,000. So to be at 1.1 million in annual sales, it was pretty remarkable. We saw a lot of volume, 2,700 square feet retail. We were open 24 hours, which was really the only place in St. Louis that was open 24 hours. I mean, you could go to a courtesy diner, but pretty much that was it. And we sponsored dozens of annual events through the course of the history of the organization, donated to over 300 charities annually. We'll get into that in just a minute. Our menu consisted of coffee, teas, soda, ice creams, sandwiches, desserts. Interesting thing about teas, we sold over 300 varieties of tea. Most people kind of always thought of Coffee Cartel, well, it's a coffee shop, but really we were pretty cutting edge when it came to teas as well. We were top selling Edie's ice cream location. We sold more ice cream at Coffee Cartel than Six Flags. So we were pretty. It was pretty amazing in terms of those sales. The early in the 2000s, the city of St. Louis wanted to focus more on recycling. And so we were one of the first businesses in the city of St. Louis that actually recycled our waste, and we had green energy concepts. We switched our lighting over to LED. All of this is just to kind of give you a foundation of what Coffee Cartel was, and then we can talk about the diversity and the inclusion, which I think is super important. We were really all about shopping local. Our vendor program included, wherever possible, we used best practices to buy from local vendors first. So our coffee purveyor, a lot of our desserts, those were all came from small local businesses. And then over the course of the operation of the business, we received dozens of best of awards. And then early on, I did form a zero tolerance policy for all forms of harassment, which included our vendors, which was kind of unheard of. But we asked all of our staff, all of our vendors to pledge that they would not use social media for bullying, that they would report and take a very strong stance against all forms of harassment. So we did set a pretty strong foundation in terms of the operation of the business to really try to ensure that we were fully inclusive and doing the right thing for everyone. The beginning for us was really about what made Cartel what it was really the team building. So in the beginning, I knew that it was super important for us to invest in people who we allowed to be themselves. And that was super important. So, a lot of businesses in the early 2000s, they were, you couldn't have a tattoo, you couldn't have piercings. I mean, it was really interesting, and people were pretty uptight in the retail space, even in the Central West End, which was always surprising to me because I always thought of the Central West End as a super progressive space, but yet retailers were still pretty uptight. We tried to sort of flip that on its dime and really allow our staff to try to be individualistic as best as possible. And of course, that was always fraught with challenges, but we saw that our best asset for a store was the team, the staff, the people who were there that created the environment, the atmosphere. If they were doing all the right things, the team could really bring forth a kind of energy and a kind of excitement for the store that we think would translate to community, and we think it did. But that team building wasn't just letting people be themselves. It was also making sure that all of our staff went through management training. We did do diversity and inclusion training, and we did the inclusion and diversity training before anyone else even knew what that was. So I felt it was really important that as people were walking in our front door, we saw all kinds of people. And so it was really important for our younger staff to really understand that that's okay. That, the strange looks and the eye rolls, all those kinds of things are a form of barriers that you put up for people. So I really wanted to make sure that those things were removed from their thought process, that anyone who walked through the door was accepted. And that was an interesting challenge for us because, again, the Central West End was such a melting pot for people that we saw everything. And it's great. But the diversity and inclusion training was super important, and we were doing that really before anyone else was doing it. And then health and food and health safety were super important. A good majority of our staff went through ServSafe training and alcohol tips training, which allows you to make sure you're carding people properly. We had a lot of folks who were there who were not of age, and so we wanted to be really super sensitive that we were following all the rules and the guidelines and making sure that not only was food safety followed, but also liquor control and then health safety as well. Those things were all super important. All part of team building that I think really trickled down to treating customers just with the utmost respect, and at the same time building community. And I think that building community is what created Coffee Cartel in such an accepting way. For us, we wanted to then reach, once we built kind of our core of our people, we wanted to reach beyond that. And we really wanted to see that the community saw that we supported it. So took on a really strong initiative to sponsor every kind of team out there. But our emphasis was on teams that may not otherwise have been able to get sponsorship. So it might have been the Gay and Lesbian Softball League. It might have been the North American Volleyball League and sponsoring teams for that. It was a wide variety of teams and groups that we sponsored. Again, hey, we want to show our support for teams and organizations that may not otherwise had support. Certainly not from what I would consider to mainstream retail. Mainstream retailers tend to shy away from GLBT type sponsorships because there's still, even in early 2000, there still was a mid 2000, there still was this real concern about, we don't want to align our brand with GLBT because we don't really know what that's going to do for our sales. So even sports teams and groups were having trouble finding places to meet or finding sponsorship opportunities. And so we were really good at really reaching out and making sure we did that. And so we were real aggressive at it being fully accepting of that sort of thing, and that was important. Likewise, too, a ton of charities and organizations we contributed to on an annual basis, and we really felt that that was our part of also giving back to the community because, and again, we skewed more towards organizations that may not otherwise had seen support. And also organizations that tended to focus on youth in need and youth in crisis, especially GLBT youth issues, because we really felt that that was an area that a lot of people were missing. Again, somewhat scared and skeptical to contribute to those kinds of organizations. So we were pretty aggressive at not only sponsoring those organizations, but when they needed a place to meet. Growing American Youth met at Coffee Cartel for a long period of time. St. Louis Effort for AIDS very early on when they wanted to do AIDS testing in the community. No one wanted that to happen, but Coffee Cartel was really one of the first spots in St. Louis that you could get an HIV test, safe, secure, confidential. But you could go to Cartel and you could do that, and you could remove the stigma of having to go to a clinic or a special office. And so there were a lot of youth in the community, especially, that were able to have access to those kinds of testing and education services that, again, wouldn't have otherwise been available. And we thought that was super important for us. So having that safe space was super important too. We wanted people to believe that they could come to Coffee Cartel and be safe. And so, for example, we had a pride flag that we hung up out front of the business. And you would think in late 2000s, 2008, 2009, that wouldn't have been an issue in the Central West End. I mean, here, the first gay pride for St. Louis marched through the Central West End. So you would think, wow, there's this really progressive neighborhood, but we hung up a gay flag and actually had the neighborhood, aspects of the neighborhood, say they didn't like that visibility on a 24/7 basis. And I said, well, tough, it's going to stay there because we want folks to believe that they're, we want folks to feel welcome and accepted. And that is super important to us. So that visibility also created what I perceive to be a safe space. And so that was important to us, to be able to maintain that visibility for people, to believe that they were part of that. The logo you see in the middle of the screen was an adaptation of our regular logo that we actually put on coffee cups and T-shirts. Again, carrying forward that sort of inclusion that we support you and we embrace the GLBT community. We thought that was important, and we felt the Coffee Cartel was a very mainstream business, so we had a lot of business that was, business folks who came down from the Chase, who were visiting St. Louis, or students who were studying 24/7 with the medical campuses nearby and the universities and colleges nearby. We had a lot of student traffic. So in some ways, we were exposing what would be a mainstream consumer to the LGBT community. And that was important too. Certainly important from an acceptance standpoint. The results of all of this was that we regularly won a ton of awards, which we're very honored to have happen. Best Coffee Shop, Best A-List St. Louis, dozens of other awards, which always blew our mind because we were one location up against, in some of these polls, multiple coffee shops throughout the entire region, and yet we would still win Best of Voter awards. And I think we had great coffee, but it really wasn't, the awards we felt weren't just about the coffee. It was really about the place and the staff and the community. And so those awards, we felt, when this says Best Coffee Shop, I think people misunderstood that sometimes when other coffee shops would say, well, we think our coffee's better. Well, it was more than just about the coffee. It was really about the environment and the place. Our culture was very deep, which was important to us as well. it wasn't just about slapping a rainbow logo on stuff. We wanted to make sure that we also fully embraced the LGBT community, and that translated to hiring practices, events, like we said, sponsorship, like I said, but also making sure that we were very aggressive in the community. So we sponsored, for example, Pride Fest's T-shirts every year, so you could see the Coffee Cartel logo on all those shirts. Michelle McCausland, who unfortunately passed away this past year, very sad. She hosted every Pride the night before Pride Fest. We would host a special kickoff event at Cartel for folks to come out. And again, on that night, we made things free and things accessible, so people could come out and not feel like they've got to pay to go to any kind of event. Oftentimes, bars would run specials if you're over 21 and you have to pay to go and those sorts of things. We never did any of those things. Again, accessibility was super, super important to us. Likewise, too, we felt reaching into the community other than GLBT was also super important. We had a lot of unhoused folks who are in the Central West End, and there was a real barrier, especially with the police department. There was not an acceptance. Unhoused folks were hassled a lot. And so we created some events like Coffee with the Mayor, Coffee with the Chief, Coffee with the Cop, so that those institutions, those organizations could actually meet and mingle and learn about our community. And it really started out of a unhoused issue because the police department was really harassing a lot of unhoused folks. And so by inviting all of those folks together, it was a very successful way for police officers to get to know unhoused folks who were having struggles in the street, and try to eliminate some of that harassment that was happening. That was super important. And of course, allowing Coffee Cartel to be a venue for meetings and events free of charge was super important. So we hosted a lot of meetings. Again, we did skew more to the GLBT community. We found those organizations were having trouble finding spaces to meet. They weren't accepted. And so we really wanted to make sure that there was public spaces for folks to meet. In 2018, I decided to close the store. The sales for the store were starting to decline rapidly in that 1.5 year to year. Don't know the reasons, but that decline was happening among all those businesses in the neighborhood. So it wasn't just a Coffee Cartel issue. And so we closed the store. It became somewhat challenging from a financial standpoint, because we just saw that a lot of folks weren't coming down to the neighborhood anymore. And there's tons of reasons why. And the impact of that was great for us, because I think we knew our importance to the community, not to be self-serving, but we did know that we had an impact. But we didn't fully understand it until we closed. And then the influence of Coffee Cartel on the GLBT community was really felt, and we heard about it in the messages that we got when we closed. And I think it really, for us, was very sad for us to see these kinds of comments about people who were sad to see Cartel go. But I think what it really is for most, and what I hope people can take away, is that it's a real challenge for businesses and retailers to step up and do the right thing. Be an influence in the community in a positive way. You're not just opening up your store and saying, come be our customer, but if you truly embrace the community and really subscribe to the beliefs of the community, you can really make an amazing impact. And I think that's the message here, is not, oh, it's sad the cartel's gone, but that take away some of the lessons that we learned in Coffee Cartel in terms of the successes of what it meant to be fully community, and apply that to your business or your everyday life, and good things will certainly happen. But amazing responses from people who had their first dates at Coffee Cartel, We had folks who had 3 or 4 wedding proposals happened at Coffee Cartel. We actually hosted 2 weddings at Coffee Cartel. Um, uh, just some great experiences. We've had commercials that were shot there. Just some really great experiences happened at Cartel, and it certainly is a space that many people talk about. And again, I think its influences go back to just the weaving into the community was important to us. And we didn't do it because we were gaining sales or customers. All the things that we did was to build really a better place for us. The staff that were there, that's our single greatest asset, was the staff, the team that worked there, and the sense of family. And they wanted to be there. And that building that sense of community ended up translating out to our customers as well. So which was obviously super amazing. And our staff members, even to this date, have gone on to run other businesses, to be managers in other retail spaces in St. Louis, and continue to make amazing impacts on the work that they do. So I'm super proud of that, because that journey of diversity and inclusion now translates into other businesses and into other workspaces that allow the GLBT community to feel accepted and present in a lot of other businesses. And I think that's part of what this is about, is the growth of the GLBT community in St. Louis as it looks into the business community. So thank you all for allowing me to share our journey. We're super proud to do that, and would love to take any comments, or if folks have stories that you'd like to share. Those are certainly welcome. But I'm just super honored to have been asked to do this.